Hello, my name is Chris Rosen. I'm a Senior Technical Offering Manager for the IBM Bluemix Container Service. Today we'll walk through and give an introduction to Vulnerability Advisor, security at your fingertips within the IBM Bluemix Container Service. Today's agenda, we will go through a brief introduction to getting started with Docker, talk about some of the security concerns that you should be aware of, dig into some of the details of the IBM Bluemix Container Service, talk about what is DevSecOps and what does that mean for you. And then lastly, we'll cover some of the Vulnerability Advisor details and how we can help you with these security concerns. For today's discussion, we will assume some level of familiarity with Docker itself. And suffice it to say that Docker has made it very easy to get started with Docker on your laptop. By installing a toolkit, you can be up and running in a very short amount of time to start developing and creating applications. Something as simple as Docker pull image name, Docker run image name. In this example, we have WordPress, which is an online open source website creation tool. You can have that up and running on your laptop again very quickly. Despite being very easy, the downside is you have no insight to what is actually inside of that image before you pull it down and deploy it to a live running container in your environment. 80% of attacks leverage known vulnerabilities and configuration management setting weaknesses. This is from a U.S. State Department report. Clearly, attackers are looking to exploit known vulnerabilities and opportunities with weak configuration. A Banyan Ops report stated that over 30% of official images in Docker Hub contain high priority security vulnerabilities. But as we previously discussed, it's very easy to do a Docker run against an image. Now you're running that locally without any insight to the security compliance posture of that image. One example was Shellshock was found in some of these images. Shellshock, which exploits web servers and could potentially compromise and infect other computers on your network. Another example found in Docker Hub images is Heartbleed, which exploits OpenSSL and by compromising your secret keys can then impersonate other services and users. These security concerns put companies into an extremely difficult position. On one hand, we have developers that want to use the latest tools such as containers and microservices to create new cloud-native applications. On the other hand, we have operations and security teams that are concerned with things such as compliance and uptime and most importantly, maintaining a secure environment. So the question is, how do we blend all of these worlds together? The answer is the IBM Bluemix Container Service, which was launched in June 2015 as a key component of the IBM Bluemix Cloud. Now let's take a deeper dive and look at what the IBM Bluemix Container Service is. The IBM Bluemix Container Service is a fully managed, hosted container as a service offering. As a part of the offering, we maintain the infrastructure with patching, maintenance, and most importantly, security, allowing you to focus on your actual application development. We include integrated logging and monitoring. Therefore, regardless of image source, every time you instantiate a new live container, we're taking that logging and monitoring data back to the Bluemix dashboard. There's a private hosted registry allowing you the controls over who has access, who can publish images to that registry. We also provide container groups, which include an integrated load balancer and auto recovery for when a container crashes will automatically deploy a replacement to keep you at the threshold that you specified. With that load balancer, you can specify a fully qualified domain name, which is then externally accessible. We have auto scaling, so that way you can set a policy to scale up or down based on exceeding certain thresholds that you specify. Containers are ephemeral, therefore we need a solution to store your persistent data. Within Bluemix there are two ways. One is by using a database service from the Bluemix catalog and then binding that database to your container at deploy time. Alternatively, we also have a volume service where you can choose the size and the IOPS to meet your requirements. We maintain the lifecycle of that volume, so as you roll out new versions of containers and containers crash, the data is still there in the volume service and we maintain that. The service also provides overlay networking so that each container in your microservices architecture is deployed with its own private non-routed IP address so they can communicate directly without any type of port mapping. We also provide the ability for IP management to request and bind a publicly routed IP address when you're ready to expose a given container externally. There's also IBM provided content. So in your private hosted registry, we've got IBM product teams that are looking to deliver their content via Docker images. We also make it very easy to consume cloud APIs, whether it's a service running in the Bluemix catalog or some other cloud API. Since not everything can or should run inside a container, we know that consuming APIs needs to be very easy. So at deploy time, we're binding those variables to existing services, and then that application inside a container is leveraging those APIs. We also have advanced security features. So there's two aspects of this. There's one, the infrastructure side, which is very important. IBM is fortunate to have an entire security business unit that not only develops security products, but also acts as a consultant with best practices and helps us kind of secure that environment to ensure that we are running safely. The other side of security is the end user perspective, and we want to make it very easy for our end users, our developers, to use security and not bypass those requirements. Lastly, IBM Bluemix Container Service is built using open source Docker projects. We've not forked anything from the open community. We're using that open technology so that way you can use the same Docker CLI and API and have that consistency whether you're running on your laptop or in the IBM Bluemix Container Service. When we're developing an offering like the IBM Bluemix Container Service, it's important to have certain personas in mind that we are targeting to use the service. In this scenario, we want to provide value for both the provider, in this case IBM, and you, the consumer of the container service. First, we've got our developers and testers. Their focus is to meet their organization's security and compliance criteria without having a huge amount of overhead and burden to complete a complex process. Within the customer as well, we've got a compliance officer who they want to be able to enforce their organization's security and compliance policies that are in place internally now as they transition to the public cloud. They also want the ability to audit all of the Bluemix organizations that they own for overall compliance posture. On the other side, we've got the IBM Cloud Security and Operations team that we want to make sure that images introduced to the public cloud do not have malware and misbehave and misconfigured applications to run within the IBM cloud, which could then adversely affect not only a single user, but multiple users of the cloud service. We also need the ability to analyze and report in near real time when new vulnerabilities arise. So this brings us to a new concept where we're combining development plus security plus operations into a new DevSecOps. The purpose and intent of DevSecOps is to really build in this mindset that everyone is responsible for security, and that's how we're designing our offerings within the IBM Bluemix Container Service, is to make security easy enough for everyone, even non-security experts, to be able to develop securely, with the goal of safely distributing security decisions at speed and scale. So we're moving much faster now in a DevOps paradigm, but we also need to ensure that we have security in there, hence DevSecOps, to ensure that what we are developing and innovating very quickly is also extremely secure. The goal of DevSecOps is to enable teams to release intrinsically secure software at the speed that they become familiar with DevOps. And it's really making security as code. So in integrating security into their existing CI/CD pipeline, regardless of the tools used for that pipeline, we want to make security a first-class citizen within that, ensure that security is on everyone's mind. We also need the ability to scan and run tests in every stage of deployment. So security isn't only once I've got a completed image and I've deployed that as a live container out into production. We need to integrate security throughout the entire pipeline. Vulnerability Advisor was announced in July 2015. is a key service within the IBM Bluemix Container Service, which is combining platform visibility and threat intelligence for early detection of vulnerabilities. What VA is doing is providing security and compliance not only into your static Docker images, but also to your live running containers that are running within the IBM cloud. It's important to note that Vulnerability Advisor reduces the effort to maintain security and compliance posture, but it does not change the responsibility model. So ultimately, the customers, the owners of a particular image, of a particular container, are responsible for ensuring its security. Vulnerability Advisor is designed to scan new and existing images. As new vulnerabilities come out frequently, we're scanning every layer within every image in your private hosted registry and looking for and identifying vulnerabilities. VA is intended to be used in all stages of your environments. So this comes back to the notion of DevSecOps and incorporating security throughout the entire pipeline, from development to testing, ultimately into the production environments. VA uses an introspection technology, therefore no agents are required to be installed and subsequently maintained within your images. We also are not layering anything on top of your existing images in order to take advantage of Vulnerability Advisor. Some concepts within Vulnerability Advisor. First, we have policy violations. The org administrator can configure a policy to determine if an image that has vulnerabilities can be deployed by users within your organization. Vulnerable packages. By analyzing and introspecting a Docker image and every layer in that image, and container packages for security vulnerabilities. We also have best practice improvements. This is a set of security checks based roughly on ISO 27000, which we use internally within IBM as well, and this is providing a set of recommendations to remediate those images and deploy as new containers. We're looking for things such as weak password settings, short passwords, do you have remote logins enabled? In this new container paradigm, again, we want to use native tools such as Docker attach or Docker exec and not SSHing into live containers. And then the last concept is security misconfigurations. So what we're doing is looking for common applications, whether it's Apache D or SSHD, and looking for potential security misconfigurations and then providing recommendations on how you can remediate and secure the applications within your images and containers. Traditionally, security and simplifying the user experience do not go together. However, with Vulnerability Advisor, we look to reconcile these two competing factors and avoid data overload to optimize for the end user experience. Let's take a look at how Vulnerability Advisor simplifies the user experience. We'll start with what we call day zero or image scanning. By navigating to the Bluemix catalog, I can see every image that I've pushed to my private hosted registry. This particular image that's outlined here is Elasticsearch. We can tell it's one that I've pushed because it's labeled with my org, and it also has a label of deploy with caution. Let's dig into the report and determine exactly why it has this deploy with caution label. Looking at the Vulnerability Advisor report for Elasticsearch, I can see there are several tabs. The first are the policy violations. This is where the administrator can set a policy to either warn or block users from deploying containers from a particular image that has vulnerabilities. This image has failed the first one, which is image has installed packages with known vulnerabilities. Digging into the second tab of vulnerable packages, we can see that 4 out of the 167 packages within this Elasticsearch image have vulnerabilities. They're listed here. If I choose one particular vulnerability, it will take me directly to the CVE data, which is common vulnerabilities and exposures. The link will take me directly out to the external source or the vendor that has provided this vulnerability and this fix. Back in the Bluemix console, on the third tab, I have my best practice improvements. Here, again, this is based on ISO 27000. We can look at all of the policies that we're scanning for, and in this particular instance, we can see that this image does not meet the minimum password length policies. And we also are providing recommendations on how to correct and improve and remediate those vulnerabilities. So again, in this case, the corrective action is that the minimum password length must be 8 characters. Now let's take a look at Secure Config Advisor within Vulnerability Advisor. As we navigate to the fourth tab labeled Security Misconfigurations, we can see that this particular image has Apache and then also all of the security checks that we are doing for it. So this one is failing 1 out of 6 configurations, and we've detected an insecure configuration in Apache Web Server. And the description of this is that it is using an insecure cipher suite in Apache Web Server, and that we've detected that, and that is increasing your vulnerability. Now let's fast forward. Our developer has actually remediated that fix and improved the cipher suite used by Apache Web Server and pushed a new version going from version 10 to version 11 to their registry, and now we can see that this one is not failing any of the security misconfigurations. The last tab in the report shows the container instances. In this case, we have 0 running containers based on this Elasticsearch image. Now let's move on to what we call Day 1 Plus, or live container scanning. This screenshot shows that I've already have a running container. In the lower right hand side, I've got the ability to click on View Report. When I bring this up, you'll see a commonality with the image report showing policy violations, vulnerable packages, best practice improvements, security misconfigurations, and then the delta here is that it's showing the image that this live container is based from. Now let's look at policy management. It's very important for our administrators to be able to configure policy to determine if users can or cannot deploy images that have vulnerabilities. Here, again, as a Bluemix org administrator, there are 3 policies in which I can set warn or block actions. As I change the policy from warn to block and click Save, we're automatically doing a real-time assessment of every image and, again, every layer in those images within your private hosted registry. Some administrator views within Vulnerability Advisor. It's important, again, as the admin to look at the entire breadth of your Bluemix organization. So this is showing my image list for my organization, and it'll list every single image that I have in here, give me a policy status, policy violation, vulnerable packages, and then best practice report for all of those images. I also have the ability to see the entire list of containers that I have deployed within my Bluemix space and determine if anything that is deployed has drifted from a secure state when it was initially deployed. The team is working on a new component called risk analysis, and this is very important because this will help us answer the question, how bad is it really? We've seen through Vulnerability Advisor and its reports of various images and containers, things like vulnerable packages and security misconfigurations. But really, what does that mean? How severe are each of these vulnerabilities? Here, we'll roll out a new tab in the report called the Vulnerability Risk Score. And what this is doing, by partnering with IBM X-Force, looking at all of the vulnerabilities, whether it's packages or best practice improvements or security misconfigurations, looking at them in totality and coming up with a base score assessing the real risk of that particular image or container. Here are some additional details of that report where we can look at package by package and get a risk assessment for each of those. So we can see here that the first one is critical and the second one is high, and the remaining may be low, which could be acceptable in a dev and test environment, but maybe not so in your production environment. Another new area is malware detection. This will actually show up as a new rule in the Best Practice Improvements tab. In this particular image, you can see that no malware was found. But what we will start to do is introspect images, and again, every layer in those images or that container, and look for known malware and identify that to you. At this point, I hope everyone agrees that containers are the next generation of cloud computing. There's an interesting ETR study that they do quarterly where they go out and talk to enterprises about the technologies that they plan to adopt. 97% was by far the highest percentage of any technology that ETR has surveyed in the past 20 years. So clearly, if you have not yet developed your container strategy, your competitors are. And by doing so, they're leveraging containers to enable innovation and speed. But what's important is that without the proper security insight, this can lead to catastrophic problems for you and for your business. The IBM Bluemix Container Service makes security a first-class component within our offering, and it simplifies security insights, making that a very simplified user experience and consumption model around security. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to continuing the discussion either on Twitter or you can email directly. Thank you.